Alright guys, for this to work, I'm gonna need you all to pretend it's still Halloween. Alright? Can we do that? Okay. Hey guys, Trip here. With Bloodlines 2, hopefully coming out soon, I figured it was time to return to the world of darkness to discuss the various factions you'll be meeting in the game. For those new to the series, we're talking about Vampire the Masquerade, a modern fantasy franchise where vampires, werewolves, and wizards live among us, hidden in plain sight. Last time we talked about the Camarilla, the more modern and cosmopolitan of the vampiric factions of the 21st century. Today we're delving into something a little darker, a little more extreme. But before we get to that, we need a bit of context. The Sabbat doesn't exist in a vacuum. They are a direct response to the worst aspects of vampiric society, a total rejection of Byzantine political schemes and sneering elitism. So before we can even discuss the Sabbat, we need to understand how vampiric society works. Cainite civilization is based around the concept of generations. We talked more about generations in the last episode, but put simply, a vampire's generation is his distance from Cain on the undead family tree. Cain is the mythical father of all vampires and the source of vampiric blood. You see, whether you're a lowly thin blood or Cain himself, creating a new vampire isn't as simple as biting someone. You need to use a bit of your own blood. But of course, this is just a small portion of a vampire's power, mixing and diluting with mortal blood to create a new Cainite. So when Cain embraces someone, they'll naturally be a bit weaker than him. When that vampire embraces someone new, that person will be a bit weaker still. This goes on and on until the blood of Cain is so weak within you that you're barely a vampire at all. Embracing someone also bonds them to you, meaning your sire has some level of control over your thoughts, feelings, and actions. This is known as the blood bond, and it grows stronger each time you drink a vampire's blood. This blood-soaked pyramid scheme is the defining aspect of vampiric civilization. It all comes back to this. The higher your generation, the less control you have over your own unlife. The only way to truly increase your station is by fully draining the blood of a more powerful vampire. Conveniently, this is considered an unspeakable crime in most vampiric circles. Of course, the leaders of the Camarilla deny the existence of Cain, but they quietly embrace these power differences as a means of ensuring order. Their argument being that if vampires could spread their full power to their children, then this would lead to absolute chaos, as inexperienced vampires run rampant across the world. Other factions, like the Sabbat, see this as a defining struggle of unlife. This is the basis for what many vampires call the jihad, the eternal struggle between the young, the old, and the unfathomably ancient. There are many organizations scattered across the globe that rebel against the status quo of vampiric society, but none are as widespread or as enduring as the Sabbat. But what is the Sabbat, really? Well, hold on to your asses, cause this one's gonna be a wild journey. Seriously, the Sabbat is one of the most diverse and complicated factions I've ever covered on this channel. Sure, I could sum things up in a couple minutes, but where's the fun in that? Instead, I want to take you guys on a journey. We're going to be covering every aspect of the Sabbat, from their recruiting tactics to their beliefs to their day-to-day culture. I read a lot of official material concerning the Sabbat, and it does a great job of putting you in the heads of these people. That's what I want to do. I want to immerse you guys in this dark world. I want us to understand the Sabbat, to understand how other vampires see them, and how they see themselves. So, if that sounds like a good time to you, let's dive in. Put simply, the Sabbat is everything the Camarilla is not. They're a global organization of vampires who embrace what it means to be a Cainite. They've no desire to live in the shadows of humanity like rats scuttling in the dark. to live a cursed half-life between vampire and human, to cling to something that is dead and useless. The Sabbat see vampirism as the only state of existence that matters, and they reject human interpretations of law, morals, and decency. To the Sabbat, the Camarilla are delusional cosplayers of humanity, clinging desperately to human institutions like parasites. The Sabbat are not parasites. They're apex predators. They accept the Masquerade with open scorn, and only out of sheer necessity, jumping on any opportunity to engage in wanton violence and bloodshed against the cattle they prey upon. They don't embrace mortals in grand ceremonies or intimate encounters like the Camarilla, and rarely do they embrace consensually. More often, the Sabbat will simply go to a crime-riddled area and kidnap people off the streets. No one would ask questions about a few punks going missing in the dead of night, and the Sabbat likely control a few of the local gangs in order to keep people quiet. These unfortunate victims are embraced before being buried together in makeshift graves, the din of groaning factories and blaring sirens drowning out their confused screams. As the change takes hold of them, they're not in the arms of their creator, but buried 6 feet beneath the earth, writhing and suffocating as their organs begin to fail and their body begins rejecting them. Nothing but the muffled screams of other victims to accompany their own. For the Sabbat, your existence before your embrace is a mere footnote compared to a glorious undead existence. When these shovelheads emerge biting and screaming out of the dirt, this is the true start of their lives. This is their birth. These confused newborns are then thrown in the front lines of battle like cannon fodder. The Sabbat have plenty of enemies after all, and a few blood-crazed shock troops could always come in handy. At best, they'll be given a gun. At worst, they'll have to make do with their bare hands alone. Many don't even know they're vampires, only that they're consumed by violent urges and an overpowering thirst. Now, this process is effective in destroying the victim's psyche through sheer trauma, effectively reducing them to a blank slate, with their previous lives a mere echo in the face of these sudden horrors. Only those that survive these trials are considered true Sabbat and are welcomed by their new family with open arms. The rest are forgotten, their families never knowing what became of them, lost as another statistic in a missing persons report. As you can see, the Sabbat have a very different moral compass than the Camarilla, but that's not to say they're entirely amoral. Perhaps more frighteningly, the Sabbat follow their own moral codes, known as paths of enlightenment, forsaking their humanity in favor of dark, alien belief systems that often show little regard, if any, for mortal life. At its core, the Sabbat is about embracing one's vampiric nature, forsaking humanity in its entirety, and exploring new paths of expression and enlightenment. The Sabbat aren't here to cling to their mortal lives. They exist to explore every facet of their cursed existence, to indulge in their inner beast, and to revel in their own damnation. But the Sabbat isn't just some cabal of mustache-twirling villains. They began as a group of anarchists, rebelling against the hierarchies and restrictions of vampiric society. This sense of freedom and equality among vampires is a core tenet to the Sabbat, and it permeates everything they do. Perhaps the most terrifying thing about the Sabbat is that as cruel as they are to mortals, they're surprisingly respectful toward their own kind. For example, unlike the Camarilla, who enforce their loyalty through blood bonds, the Sabbat favors a more egalitarian approach. Instead of merely drinking your sire's blood and becoming their slave, the Sabbat packs bleed each other into a drinking vessel before sharing the grisly concoction with their comrades. This ensures that every member is equally loyal to one another, maintaining order without sacrificing free will. It also purges any existing blood bonds a vampire might bear, releasing them from the shackles of their former masters. This practice is known as the Valdery. While it's much weaker than a traditional blood bond, it keeps the Sabbat from devolving into constant infighting without resorting to the outright mind enslavement of the Camarilla. Believe it or not, faith is a very important aspect to the Sabbat. Amidst the diverse and often conflicting philosophies of this faction is a single, uniting belief in the legend of Cain, father of all vampires. Most kindred believe these tales to be allegorical at best or childish fairy tales at worst. The Sabbat are alone in their faith, united by their dark father and his edicts. These beliefs are a galvanizing force for the Sabbat, imbuing their struggle against vampiric society with a religious significance. As such, the Sabbat have their own loose hierarchy of warlords and priests, and are ironically more organized than the Camarilla itself. They band together in packs of 3 to 10, living together in communes, often disguised as rundown apartments or abandoned warehouses. Unlike the Camarilla, which exists solely to maintain the status quo, the Sabbat is driven by solidarity and faith. But what exactly do these people believe? Why do they see Cain as their spiritual leader? How does this all tie in to their quest for freedom? Well, to answer that, we need to dig a bit deeper. According to vampiric legend, Cain once ruled the first city on Earth, long before recorded history. Alongside his 3 children, they ruled the world unopposed. They explored the limitations of vampirism and pushed themselves further still, on an endless journey of knowledge, growth, and understanding. Cain's children eventually sired 13 vampires of their own. These children, jealous of their more powerful sires, murdered them in cold blood, destroying the first city in the process. Cain, as you can imagine, wasn't too happy about this, and cursed his grandchildren and their descendants. The Sabbat believe that this is the source of the many ironic weaknesses that plague the vampire clans to this day. For most vampires, this is where the legend ends. For the Sabbat, it's just the beginning. You see, they believe that Cain's grandchildren still exist, and that they're secretly the ones running the Camarilla. Now, this may sound like an insane conspiracy theory, but in truth, the vast majority of vampires have no idea who's actually running their society. Orders get handed down through dozens of silent cabals and hidden factions before they reach the ear of your local prince, who himself is likely unaware who exactly is calling the shots. Generally, it's agreed that the Camarilla is run by the oldest and most respected vampires in the world, and that's where the questions end. The Sabbat believes that whoever is running the Camarilla is secretly being puppeteered by Cain's grandchildren. According to them, these ancient beings are waging a silent war in the most secretive corners of vampiric society, using younger vampires as pawns in their bid to survive Cain's eternal wrath. All vampires are guided by the invisible talons of these Lovecraftian terrors. All the suffering, all the injustice, all the infighting that defines 21st century unlife is a mere trickle-down effect of their unknowable schemes. Because of this, the Sabbat are driven by their hatred of these now ancient grandchildren known as the Antediluvians. According to legend, these eldritch beings remain in hibernation, but they exert their influence on their descendants every day, infecting their minds with their own blasphemous will. This secret struggle is explained perfectly by one of the NPCs in the original Bloodlines.
Elders command the blood, they control the blood, and the blood listens. You'll never even hear their call, but the blood will, and it'll make you obey. Nothing you can do. Some ancient sleeping in a tomb half a world away has a bad dream, and you gon' feel that shit, like it or not.
While there are many ways to interpret the various holy scriptures of Cain, the Sabbat generally agrees on a few things. Number 1. Vampirism is a curse. Whether you like it or not, you are a monster, and nothing you do can change this fact. 2. The Sabbat believe they must embrace this curse as Cain did, to defy their divine punishment by reveling in its pleasures, enduring its pain, and exploring its secrets. 3. Cain was cursed for his pursuit of freedom, for his desire to be unshackled by man or by God. Freedom is the ultimate purpose of a vampire's existence. Number 4. Age and generation do not give one the right to rule. The rule of elders must be torn down. The most ancient vampires who scheme from the shadows and slumber for centuries on end exist only to be diablerized by those more worthy of their power. And finally, the Sabbat believe that Gehenna is approaching, an apocalyptic event where the most ancient vampires will rise to consume their children, and when Cain will reveal himself to protect the faithful and lead them to victory over the schemes of the elite. Balancing these often conflicting priorities is an everyday struggle for a Sabbat vampire. Why did Cain curse his grandchildren for defying their own elders? How do you balance your personal freedom with the needs of your pack? If authority is evil, why follow anyone at all? These seeming contradictions have driven Sabbat debate for centuries and are the basis for various bizarre and arcane schools of thought. Generally, the Sabbat believes that respect is earned and that freedom comes with responsibility. Leaders are chosen based solely on their merit, reputation, and dedication to the cause. Even if their position is won through treachery, this can be viewed favorably if their actions advance the cause of the Sabbat as a whole. Outside of basic duties, Sabbat leaders rarely make direct orders to their subordinates, instead framing them as requests. Of course, failure to comply with these requests can result in dire consequences. In the Sabbat, your reputation and your pack are all that you have. A Sabbat with neither isn't going to survive for long. Like I said, freedom comes with responsibility, and the Sabbat are more than willing to tear you limb from limb if they feel you're not pulling your weight. Still, compared to the Camarilla, the Sabbat is a far more egalitarian, personal, and even intimate organization. Sabbat members know their local bishop and frequently spend time with them during rituals and ceremonies. Sabbat packs live together and are violently loyal to one another. While some are just as selfish as their Camarilla rivals, many others are driven by what they see as the greater good. Overall, the Sabbat are driven by vampiric lore, philosophy, and their desire for absolute freedom. They are each on an endless quest to liberate themselves from the shackles of their forefathers, awaiting the day of Cain's glorious return and their own eternal salvation. They're fanatical, deranged revolutionaries that seek to tear down the very foundations of civilization. They're at once rebellious freedom fighters and psychotic monsters, as cruel as they are noble, as wise as they are mad. Unlike the Camarilla, the Sabbat don't organize themselves based on their respective clans. In fact, there's only 2 vampire clans that fully support the Sabbat. The rest are outcasts and rejects from their clan at large, and Sabbat packs can include members from any number of clans. Speaking of which, we've brought up these packs several times, but what exactly are they? How do they function? What do they look like on a day-to-day basis? As with most things concerning the Sabbat, it depends. They could be biker gangs roaming the highways like sharks in search of blood. They might be reclusive scholars in search of forgotten lore, or a group of escorts that control a city through webs of blackmail and seduction. They could even be a dark carnival of flesh-crafted beasts, spreading unholy terrors straight out of a child's nightmares. A Sabbat pack could be almost anything you can imagine. The Sabbat is not a single culture. They're a global collective of vampires, bound together by a shared desire to free themselves from human restrictions. If you want to know more about the specific packs and clans of the Sabbat, let me know in the comments. As you can probably tell, the Sabbat fascinates me. They're one of the most creative factions the world of darkness has to offer. Their culture and beliefs weave in and out between Christianity, anarchy, terrorism. It's that sort of melding and meshing of relatable topics that make modern fantasy so interesting to me. The Sabbat may be absolute monsters, but I can't bring myself to hate them. Wouldn't many humans behave the same way if the tables were turned? If we were put on this earth with a species that was weaker than ourselves? To a lesser extent, aren't we doing that right now? The Sabbat may seem like cliched cartoon villains, but once you pull back the surface, you might be surprised to see how human they really are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, Trip here. I actually had a lot of fun making this video, as you could probably tell. I was originally planning on this video being much more about the two specific clans of the Sabbat, but the video was running long as it was, so I figured if you guys want to see more, I can always just make another video. Speaking of which, this is the first lore video I've done in a long time, and it was by far the most complicated topic I've ever had to cover, so hopefully the video wasn't too hard to follow. Now, I actually love doing this, so if you guys want to see me cover different topics from different games, let me know in the comments. Oh, and if you want more Psychotrip for some reason, check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/psychotripstreams. I stream multiple times per week, and I'm currently in the market for a new gaming PC, so if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe, and drop me $1 or $2 if you're feeling generous. Considering the fact that I just revealed the Sabbat's innermost secrets, I might need to start an emergency fund. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Batman, do you think
Bloodline 2.
it's ever coming out? I don't think it's coming out.